Welcome to Edwards Virginia Smokehouse Cured Meat Q&A. How is ash used in unique curing methods?
Curing, ashes are more of a pest control, an old-timey use of ashes. So years ago, people in colder temps would typically cure the meat in the winter when it was cold, put the hams in salt, wash the excess salt off, smoke the meat, and then put it in like a cloth bag and set it back down in an empty salt bin, and then cover up the hams. Uh, Once they've had a little bit of age on them, cover them up in the ashes from the uh, fire pit that they used to smoke the hams with, because the ashes served as a pest control to keep flies and what we refer to as mites off the ham. Um, the cloth bag kept the ash from getting on the surface of the meat. It's one of the reasons why you smoke the meat, because smoke itself is a deterrent to insects. Um, so obviously the USDA would not allow that kind of activity today. But there is a real benefit to the ash being put on it. A more modern use of pest control would have been borax, and I think there's still farmers today that use borax on the surface of dry cured meats on the farm. As it gets into the springtime, they pat that on the face of the ham where the raw meat is after smoking. It keeps flies, those green flies, and it turns into skippers, which are like little worms that maggots get into the ham. But that borax keeps it off. And of course, then before you take it down after it's aged, you scrub all that off. Borax is a soap, so I can't say whether I know how the USDA feels about that today. But at one time, that was acceptable in a ham house. You could do that, and at some point in time, they felt like that was unacceptable. So we stopped doing that, I would say, back in the 1940s. But I remember as a kid that I saw barrels of borax soap in a warehouse that clearly hadn't been used in a long, long time. And I asked my father what it was for, and he said, well, back in the 40s, that's what they used to do, put it on the face of the ham to keep flies off. So salt cure it, wash the salt off. You hang it up in a smokehouse during the warmer months, like in the springtime. So it as the temperatures warm up, and then you start the smoke. You smoke the ham. Again, if you're starting the smoke first thing in the morning, then they would let it burn down at night, start it up in the morning. Takes about 2 weeks of smoking. It depends on what part of the country you're in. When flies start to become a problem, in Virginia, that's fairly early on these days. But in colder climates in the north, that probably didn't start happening until maybe mid-March. So you would typically put the ham in a peanut sack, or in our neck of the woods, a peanut sack, cloth sack, a muslin bag, something like that, and seal it off, tie it off, and then bury it in a real fine ash and cover them up completely. Check the ham before you put it in the bag. Make sure no bugs have gotten into it, and if you do see an area where a bug had gotten into it, cut it out, and then bury it, cover it up in the bag, put that ash over top of it. It doesn't help the curing at all. It's just a pest control process. And then you leave it covered up in that ash. And people would do not just the ham, but the belly and the shoulder and other parts of the pig that are dry cured. And when it was time to had enough age to it, they would pull the piece out, wash it off, and serve it.
I think, a lot of it goes back to, you have to remember a lot of those older methods are, at a time when everything was still being done ambient. It was just your smokehouse was open air. That's where you would salt the hams, take take the cure off, let them equalize, smoke them in the same building, let them age in the same building where you had open air, open windows, open fire pits, whatever the case may be. So, pest control from insects to other forms of pests getting into the smokehouse, you had to find some way to, deter them from getting on the hams. At one point, pepper, cracked pepper was a very popular item for that, until it got expensive to the point where farmers or anybody carrying ham started looking for other means. Now, as Sam said, there's still a lot of farmers out there and folks in general that are doing small batch hams on their own. They're not regulated by any government entity. They're doing it for their home use, and they're still doing ambient. So they have to find ways to keep some of those pests out of there and not involved. And yes, hello, Kat. We have an audience today interested in the cam questions as well, but and that's something just to keep in mind when you hear about some of the older curing methods. Some of the older, while our curing methods still hold true to this day, means of pest control, the fact that we, things are done indoors in a controlled environment, heavily regulated. We don't have to, so much worry about things like fire pit ashes or borax or other items in there to keep the pests away. Hopefully, everyone out there curing hams, for general consumption has enough controls in their own facility to keep those things out.
So
right.
a quick story about a local farmer. He said his in-laws were from Italy, and they came over to visit. And one day when he was gone and the whole family was gone except for the Italian mother, and she had heard about country hams in Virginia, and she was meandering around the farm one day and went out to the smokehouse and saw these hams hanging. Of course, being from Italy, being about the prosciutto ham and whatnot, she took one down and brought it into the kitchen and began to carve on it. Well, he had it with the borax soap all over it. She didn't know that that's what that was, and just carved it and began to eat it with the borax soap all over it, thinking that it was, I don't know what, mold, I guess. And when he got home, she said, I really like the meaty part, but whatever's on the surface is a terrible taste to it. I cut that off. Thankfully, she did eventually cut it off before she ate some more. But anyway, so it's still being used.
Got a cured meat question? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.